Hello. Hi. My name's Ruby Warrington. I'm a British journalist and lifestyle writer. I currently live in New York. I've been there for 5 years next month. This is my first ever Facebook Live, and I'm not actually sure where I'm supposed to be looking, so I don't look like I'm looking at me. So I look like I'm looking at you. So you'll have to please forgive me if I'm a little bit rusty and a bit weird on this. It's the first one I've done. So actually, thank you, Laura Willoughby, for making me do this, because everyone's always going to me, you should do Facebook Lives. And I never do, because I'm really shy. So thank you all for having me. Thank you for having me, Laura, and Club Soda UK.co.uk. I'm really, really thrilled to be here. Like I said, I'm a writer. I run a conscious lifestyle platform called The Numinous. You might want to check it out. It's the-numinous.com, which covers all aspects of alternative healing modalities, all sorts of mystical arts like astrology and the tarot, but all through a very modern sort of aspirational lifestyle lens. My background is in fashion magazines and lifestyle journalism in the UK, and I was features editor at the Sunday Times Style for quite a long time before I moved to New York, like I said, 5 years ago. And interestingly, leading on to why I'm talking to you tonight and today about sobriety, that move to New York was really the kickstart of my journey towards getting alcohol out of my life, to the point that this time last year, I launched an event series in New York called Club Soda NYC and only discovered Laura and her work towards the end of the summer last year, when somebody at one of our events gave me the brilliant book This Naked Mind by Annie Grace, which I don't know if many of you have read about it. Laura said that she's worked with Annie before, and the book was a game changer, and it was in the back Annie recommends all sorts of resources, and I discovered Laura and her amazing work, which is really, really cool. And like I said, I'm in London, and I'm actually bringing this event series that I host in New York to London under the name Off the Rocks. It's happening next week at the Metropolitan Hotel in London, which I'm really excited / really nervous about. Because if this is nerve-wracking, that's even more so. But hey, getting quite used to facing my fear of social anxiety stone cold sober and feeling empowered in that. So bring it on, I say. And I love the fact that I'm hosting it at the Metropolitan, which is the location for the infamous Met Bar, which during the 90s and early noughties, when I was sort of coming of age in London as a young journalist, which, by the way, is a high-risk profession for alcoholism, since learned, the Met Bar, you know, the Oasis and... Oops, you having internet problems your end? No internet problems my end, I don't think. So I hope this is all not... Oh, yeah, it's working for Joe. Yeah, I'm just going to keep going. So yeah, it's the venue of the Met Bar, which for anyone who kind of came of age in that sort of Britpop ladette era, the height of aspiration was sort of Kate Moss falling out of the Met Bar, absolutely rat-assed. And I thought it was really interesting when I went to speak to them about hosting this event at their venue. The PR for the hotel kind of said, you know, your journey and where you're at with this conversation actually really mirrors how our guest experience and what they want has completely transformed over the past 15 years. Our guests are no longer interested in coming to the Met Bar and falling out drunk at sort of 3 a.m. They want to come to the hotel, eat some great food, have a good night's sleep, and leave feeling better than when they arrived. And that's pretty much my take on life these days too. So I guess, yeah, like I said, moving to New York was a real turning point for me in terms of addressing what had become really, really, I would describe as really deeply ingrained habitual drinking patterns that I and my peers and my generation, I suppose, growing up in London, like I said, in the 90s and noughties, was just completely normalised, and still is. I would drink 3 or 4 nights a week socially, a couple of times a month. I'd have a big binge. And it probably did progress a little bit as I kind of like got towards my middle 30s, but I got to the age of about 34, 35, and I really have been able to identify alcohol as actually the root of a lot of the anxiety I was feeling at the time, and a lot of just overall sort of unhappiness in my life. And so made a decision internally then. This wasn't really something, this is something I spoke to a few close friends about, but just internally, that I would really sort of like try to moderate and cut alcohol out of my life. And moving to New York, where I got an opportunity to kind of like reinvent myself in a sense, and certainly build a completely different social life, was a big opportunity to be able to do that. Despite the fact that moving to a town like New York, which like London is a hard drinking town in that it's a very social town, it wasn't immediate, and it's taken me the past 4 or 5 years to really get to a place where now I probably drink 3 or 4 times a year. This year I've drunk about 3 or 4 times a year, and every time has been extremely carefully considered and mindfully monitored. And each time I do it, to be honest, I'm still a bit like, why did I really do that? Well, I tell you what, there have been 3 times this year when it's really felt like alcohol is the appropriate substance for me in that situation. And every time it was when I wanted to dance my arse off. Once at an LCD sound system concert at Austin City Limits, once at an overnight rave in Poland that my brother was DJing at, and then on Christmas Day I had a few drinks, Christmas Day, and spent the afternoon dancing around my apartment. Still felt horrendous the next day and was just like, why on earth? But actually, for me, after 5 years down the line, I've got to a point where I think that alcohol for a bit of a dance 2 or 3 times a year, that's it for me. That's all I desire it for, actually, which feels like an amazing place to have got to. Not that it has been easy at all. It seems like this is working. I think it's a few comments. I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to get to Laura's questions. She sent over a bunch earlier that people have been sending in. How many day ones did you have? My journey it was never kind of a cut and dry, like I'm going to stop drinking. It was always I describe myself, so I use a term sober curious, and for me, being sober curious means really kind of like taking a step back, and with perspective, really considering all the aspects of why I drink, how alcohol actually makes me feel. So over the past 5 years, I have had, yes, many times when I've been like, no, that's it, not drinking for however long. And then kind of like slowly it came back in, and slowly I would start drinking again, and then I'd have another one. So over 5 years, how many day ones? I don't know, countless, but I don't really count them as day ones, because it was never for me an ultimatum, like a cut and dried. It was just right, I'm going to stop for a good bit, and that's it. What was my first goal? I think my first goal really was just to, I guess, yeah, right back in the very beginning, I did the whole kind of, I'll only drink at weekends, or I'll only drink when I'm out, I will never drink when I'm at home, those sorts of things. And it just didn't really work, because inevitably, as we know, it's the slippery slope, and you end up kind of like, it just kind of like gets back into your consciousness. And for me, it would just kind of like build up again to the point where I was back to drinking what I was before. So I guess there must have come a point, and I can't remember exactly when it was, when I did my first dry January, which was probably 2 or 3 years ago. I would say the past 2-3 years have been the time when I've really cut it out. And I probably started with like, right, I'm going to go 2 weeks and not have anything at all. And then that felt really, really, really good, actually. So I'm going to go another like 3 weeks and not have anything at all. And so I've just kind of like been extending those periods of total abstinence, to the point where now it's like 3-4 months will go by with nothing at all. And there'll be an occasion come up, like the South by Southwest concert, which was a really good one. My husband and I went on a month-long road trip in October. And on the first day of the trip, we flew into Austin, Texas, and we're big fans of LCD Sound System, and we thought they weren't ever doing live shows anymore. And we just had been Googling about this randomly, and discovered they were actually playing that night at South by Southwest on the night that we was kicking off this road trip. And we had a few beers. And actually, I don't like using the word special occasions, because I don't believe that alcohol is for special occasions. I don't believe that alcohol is special. But for me, I think what my journey has really helped me to get to is that alcohol is an extremely potent psychoactive drug. and there are certain instances when it is an appropriate enhancement to an experience that I really want to have, and those experiences are very, very few and far between. So I treat alcohol with extreme caution. I don't treat alcohol as a special occasion. I did my second sober wedding last night. One of my best friends, a group of people who I used to work with 15 years ago, and we've all remained as close as kind of like college buddies would have done. And it was absolutely brilliant, and it felt incredibly special, and in fact even more special being sober, because I am now able to remember all of the wonderful emotions I was feeling, being there together with everyone. The reason I think I like alcohol to have a dance when I'm out in a field under the stars is that it just really puts me, it does kind of like put me into my body, and it loosens my inhibitions, and I can just really go for it. And sometimes I actually feel like that's pretty healthy for someone who can be kind of shy and a bit uptight at times. So that was a bit of a long answer to about the first goal, but yeah, it's a tricky one. It's been a real kind of up and down, winding, curious path of just asking myself lots and lots of questions along the way about why am I drinking? But most of all, how is this really making me feel? 9 times out of 10, it makes me feel a bit meh. It makes me feel like someone's put a glass jar over my head and I'm kind of like separated from the world. It makes me feel a bit slow and a bit stupid. None of the things I really want to be feeling. But when the music's great and it's a field and it's in the middle of Poland and it's 4 a.m, it makes me feel wild. And that feels right. So there we go. What tips do you have to getting through that initial comfort? This is where I think my yoga practice has been really, really, really beneficial to this entire sober curious journey. Yoga teaches you to feel discomfort and just sit with it and move and allow it to pass, or to breathe through it, or to find some way to just kind of like sit and wait and allow it to pass. It teaches you that that physical discomfort will pass. And that's what I found in situations, certainly when it was kind of, doing all those sober first, like I said, first sober wedding, first sober holiday, first sober dinner party at my house. My favourite thing used to be to have people over for dinner at my house and get through like 2 or 3 bottles of wine. So the first time I did that sober, it was one of those situations. And it's literally just a kind of, your brain's going, this is going to be really, really hard and painful and then you just do it, and it's not, because it's just not that bad, and your brain goes, oh, and shuts up, and you just go on with it. And for me, it's just been a question of waiting it out, just sitting with it, just kind of like acknowledging that it's going to be there, and then just kind of like sitting with it and letting it go. And if it's really awkward and uncomfortable, I just go home. Like many situations, I'm kind of like, well, I wouldn't be here unless I was drunk, so why would I be here anyway? Which is quite an empowering realization in itself, What did you do when you wobbled? Did you wobble? How did you get back on track? I think I've kind of explained a bit of that. I mean, at first, I think when you're asking about wobbles, you're asking about what they might call a relapse in recovery circles, and what I like to call a reminder. When I wobbled and maybe kind of like would have a drink when I'd been saying, no, I don't want to, I used to really, really beat myself up about it, which I don't think did me any favours really, because actually I needed to be building my self-confidence and my self-belief and my self-appreciation, and beating myself up about it was never really gonna help me feel more confident on my journey. I think what I do is, I like to say that, I am an advocate of abstinence, with room for a little bit of wiggle, with room for a little bit of being human, I just kind of accept that as a human being, I'm not perfect, and I'm not expected to be, and I don't need to be, and that's okay. So long as I'm acting with integrity and not using that as a way to make excuses to drink pretty much, whenever and willy-nilly, and not maintain my mindful attitude about drinking. Now you have been dry for a while, are you not bored? Do you not long to be able to alter your mind? 2 very interesting questions. Okay, number 1, I am by no means anti altered states of consciousness. I think that that's it's a human need. We spend most of our lives, particularly when we live in cities, living in the left brain, functional, logical side of our mind, and as human beings we need to equally access the right side, the right hand, mystical, transcendental side of our brains. And when we get out of balance is when we seek to get quickly into that kind of like altered state. Alcohol is very good at doing that for us. It shuts off all the logical side, shuts down all the kind of like logical side of the brain and just puts you in this transcendental state. But yeah, I have learned and come to appreciate and come to embody the truth that the cost of that way of getting there is way too high for me in my life. So how else do I get there? I get there through listening to music. I get there through dancing on my own, sober. I get there through meditation. Meditation has been a really huge part of this journey, which might sound a bit cliche, but I've absolutely come to believe that. Now you've been dry for a while, are you not bored? Well, no, the thing is, what I have found is that I have, now that I am 99% sober, I have found that I have so much more energy, passion and confidence to put into the projects that I truly believe in, that my mind is constantly filled with and fired up with ideas for the things I want to be working on in the world, and my business and my platform, my brand has grown exponentially, which might sound all a bit like, oh, it's just more work, but the kind of things that I'm working on, because I'm so passionate about them, again, it might sound like a cliche, it doesn't really feel like work. Yeah, it does feel like work, but it's so fulfilling and so much fun that I couldn't ever feel bored. I also read, I think it was in This Naked Mind, and it's something I quote to people quite a lot of the time, that feelings of boredom are actually one of the side effects or one of the symptoms of alcohol withdrawal. So once you've gone past, for me, it's about a 2-3 week threshold. From what I can remember. After 2-3 weeks, that kind of boredom, that sort of restlessness will lift, and I just start feeling kind of like good and energized and just naturally excited about life. I often think about, how 5-year-olds have no idea what alcohol is, no desire for alcohol, and they're never really bored. They're always like on at something, they're always finding something to amuse themselves, and I think that's within all of us, and we kind of forget once we get so used to outsourcing all of those kind of like fun, excitement and all those highs to alcohol. We forget that we can actually generate that within ourselves, and it takes sustained periods of abstinence, which for me I guess would be anything from sort of 3 weeks to sort of 3-4 months, to really kind of begin to understand and trust again that we can generate that kind of like excitement about life within ourselves, and that we don't need alcohol to do that. Let's see. How do you find big emotional situations sober? Living life in high definition? Well, definitely not boring. I mean, that's the point, right? Actually, when you're drinking all the time, life is this kind of monotonous, kind of like numbed out, just one bar to the next kind of situation. And yeah, life is an emotional roller coaster. I believe it's meant to be. Our emotions are there to give us very valuable messages about what the next actions that are right for us to take in our lives. And so I completely embrace the emotional highs now, and I'm very thankful actually to be connected to all of my emotions again. It's been really hard sometimes this year. Work has been. I wrote a book. I launched this event series in New York. I've recently launched an online mentoring program called Moon Club, and I run a magazine as well. So it's been a really, really intense work year, and at times I've just felt quite overwhelmed with that, and it's been hard to just kind of like push through it. But the last thing I've actually wanted to do was drink, and I think one of the reasons it took me a while to really identify that I had a problem with alcohol was that I was never the kind of person who would reach for a drink when I was sad or upset or depressed. I only ever drunk to enhance the good times and enhance the fun. Of course, I was numbing out from the discomfort of my social anxiety, etc. But it wasn't like I would, in fact, the last thing I would ever, if I was really upset about something, the last thing I would do would be turn to alcohol. And I think that's something I definitely have, that's something that's, I feel fortunate to have not learned in my life to drink in those situations, because I think that's when it can become very dangerous and can lead to riskier drinking that probably really does require more intense sort of like recovery program or treatment for alcohol addiction. There's a really great documentary on HBO at the moment. I don't know if anyone's seen this, but it's called Risky Drinkers, and they profile all sorts of different people who drink in all sorts of different occasions in different ways, and then have all kinds of experts commenting on these different people's behaviours, the way they drink, and sort of more and all sorts of recent research on drinking. And there's one woman, and she says, you know, for many people who get into the kind of low, the risky drinkers are about 50% of drinkers, by the way. And she says, you know, the people who get into kind of low risk are, you know, alcohol's become a friend. It's become a trusted friend who you take out on nights out and is kind of like always there by your side. And she's like, when it becomes the high risk drinking is when that friend becomes a partner, becomes your partner, and you can't do anything or think about doing anything without that partner by your side. So I'm thankful that I never had a situation in my life where I actually turned to alcohol as a way to medicate from serious emotional upset, because I think that's when it can become really dangerous. But yeah, otherwise, emotions, love it. I cry all the time. It's great, because for every emotional low, I have an emotional high. Just like for every alcohol high, there's an alcohol low. So I'd rather they were naturally generated. How do you cope in the media industry with not drinking? Well, this is very interesting. Since moving to New York, I used to do a lot of sort of, like I said, I was working at the Sunday Times. I was actually managing the party pages, so it was my job, among many others, to go to all of those annoying events and have to get, like, you know, a quote from Henry Holland and a photograph and all this stuff. And there's just booze, booze, booze. And that was my entire career, 15, 16 years, working as a journalist in London. Events 3-4 nights a week when they're just plying you with free alcohol. So yeah. But interestingly, since moving to New York, I have specialised or written much more about wellness, particularly with my own magazine, like I described. I cover a lot of sort of alternative wellness stories and these sorts of things. And so I mentioned I wrote a book this year, and one chapter is called Healing is the New Nightlife, because a lot of the media-y events I go to now are like a yoga class or like a vegan dinner tasting menu thing, and often alcohol isn't on the menu. And I think that that's been, yeah, I mean, it's a sign of the times really, in terms of what the media is covering and what people want to read about. And I think this kind of wellness revolution, as much as people are quite anti and quite cynical about the whole clean eating thing, actually it's part of a revolution in terms of people wanting to take better care of themselves, and that definitely includes drinking less, of course. So actually, even within the industry, I think that, and like I said about the Met Bar, you know, the woman who runs the Met just saying that their guests are not really so interested in late nights at the Met Bar anymore. It's just kind of like a general trend away. But this is an interest, and the other thing is that in New York they drink a lot less anyway. Like, it's the kind of thing where if you're out for dinner, people order wine by the glass. Like, to order wine by a bottle, people would give you funny looks, be like, oh really? Whereas conversely, if you're not drinking, no one says anything. Unlike in the UK, as we know, they'll all start gossiping as to whether you're pregnant or secretly in AA as soon as you've gone to the toilet, not to mention telling you that you've ruined everyone else's night. So that kind of like made it a lot easier too. But yeah, in terms of the media industry, I'm actually really nervous about doing this event in London on Wednesday. A lot of my media friends and contacts are coming to support me, but also I'm very apprehensive about the reaction, because, as I just said, I mean, people can be very cynical and judgmental about this positive choice that we've made for ourselves. We all know what that says about them and their drinking habits. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how it goes down. So far, people have seemed very curious, and in fact, I wrote a piece for Grazia magazine that came out this week, and so many people reached out to me on Facebook and were kind of like, oh well, this is so interesting, I've really been thinking about this in my life too. And so I think that even the hard drinking journalist crew are coming around to this kind of are getting on board with the wellness revolution that also includes the sobriety piece. Do you ever think you could moderate? Well, I think I kind of explained that. this is an unpopular and it's a controversial conversation, because I have been criticised by people in the sober recovery community for even talking about the fact that I still on occasion drink whilst running these like sober nights, and I don't know whether I can even call myself sober, because that has so many connotations. Like, it's just a word, but it has so many connotations in terms of like recovery, addiction, and that whole way of thinking about alcohol. So there was a situation this year where I went out for dinner, and it was on this road trip actually as well. Went out for dinner, and we stayed at this beautiful hotel in Big Sur, and they had a restaurant with this kind of deck that looked out over the sea, and there was the sunset going down. And I just thought, oh, this is like, we're near Napa, maybe just like a glass of red wine would be really nice. And I got this glass of red wine, and I drank half of it, and I could feel that glass jar effect coming down, and I was a bit like, no, I want to feel this whole thing. So I stopped drinking that glass of wine and just went and had this delicious dinner, and it was amazing. And I was like, I woke up next morning, I was like, that's such a turning point, because I never thought I'd get to a point where I could drink half a glass of wine and then go, no, do you know what, I don't want it. Those few sips tasted delicious, but actually I don't really want that. I don't really feel that way. And so I think that through, like I said, 5-6 years of continuous conscious effort, I've got to a point where, yes, I am moderating, and it's not a danger, and it's not something that consumes my thoughts at all anymore. I mean, it consumes my thoughts in the sense that it's something people ask me to talk about all the time, because I'm now doing this. So it's on my mind a lot, and I talk about it a lot, but internally, I feel completely at peace with my relationship with alcohol. I did a fully sober Christmas and barely didn't think about alcohol once. I never really thought I'd get to that point. So, no, not sober Christmas, sorry, Thanksgiving. I did have 3 glasses of wine on Christmas Day, but we did our family stuff at Thanksgiving instead, and that would have been a massive trigger for me, whatever that word means. But so I personally, I think partly through the work that I do, through giving myself also, I have to say, the accountability of standing up and being a voice in this community, I've been able to get to a point where I can moderate, although I know, like I said, it's controversial because it's not easy, and it's not something that should be taken lightly. And many people will say that total abstinence is the only way, and I believe that's true for many people. So, yeah. What are the 3 best bits of advice? Gosh, I'm always really hard at these kind of questions, because I think it always really depends on the individual. So, I don't know. Don't beat yourself up for slipping up, if you want to call it slipping up. Like I said, in recovery they'd call them relapses. I call them reminders, because 9 times out of 10 it's a reminder of like, God no, so not into that anymore, and then I move on and I do another 4 months without drinking anything or whatever it is. So yeah, don't beat yourself up. Don't give yourself more reasons to feel unconfident. I would also say definitely steer clear of friends who are your heavy drinking friends. It's kind of an obvious one, and it probably comes up a lot, but I see friends I used to see for late night drinks for lunch now, and it's great. And if we don't get on in the same way and we don't connect in the same way, then I have 0 guilt whatsoever about not having those people in my life anymore. If they were just drinking buddies, then that's in my past, and they're in my past too, and that's that. And I've made so many more amazing new friends who don't drink, and who I have completely different relationship or completely different kind of like experiences with. So no guilt about cutting people out who are going to like make you feel bad about your choice. And this comes later. What's your favourite alcohol-free drink? Alcohol-free beer. Laura and I have spoken about this, and I know she's a fan of it too. The alcohol-free beer really did help me initially override my brain chemistry in those situations where I knew I'd be maybe sitting in a bar or going to a dinner party, or situations where it would be really uncomfortable, just as a little bit of a crutch to kind of like get me through. And I actually really, really loved the taste of it as well. I always really just loved the kind of like the fizz of beer and the refreshment. It's like a very unique sort of mouth feel and flavour, and I missed that. Not so much even the effect, just the kind of like taste of it. And so having an alcohol-free beer here and there has really, really helped me kind of like take massive strides in kind of getting through those social situations, and giving me the kind of like taking away the anxiety, to allow me the headspace to actually just be present in the situation, and to realise that actually I really enjoy being with these people, and I'm really enjoying this dinner party, and I don't need alcohol. And it just takes not a few, it takes quite a few, but you just have to be in those situations, I think, repeatedly, so that your brain begins to learn new stories and new associations around these social situations when you would have drunk. Learning lapses, exactly. Yes. I mean, relapse, it just sounds so negative. It sounds so guilt and shame ridden, and I think, and that's part of a big part of my message and what I talk about at my events, is that, you know, there's so much shame and stigma and secrecy around the whole subject of alcohol addiction, recovery, all these sorts of things, and I think that is what stops people from talking up about it, stops people from being honest with themselves about what's going on. And I think the more we can do to remove the stigma that comes with language like relapse, with language like recovery even, the better, really, for all of us. Favourite alcohol-free drink? Yes, we've discussed this too. My favourite non-alcoholic beer is Nanny State, which you can only get. It's an alcohol-free IPA, and you can only get it in the UK, unfortunately. In the US, they're all a little bit cheesy and naff. You can occasionally find a nice Erdinger, but otherwise it's there's something called O'Doul's. You feel like an old, like literally like an old geezer drinking these O'Doul's, but they do the job. Favourite alcohol-free reward? That's a weird one, because I'm not rewarding myself for making the right choice. It's like my favourite alcohol-free reward. I can tell you my favourite things about not drinking. My favourite thing is just the increased levels of confidence that I have, confidence in myself and my abilities. I often describe it as this feeling of being bulletproof. I sort of feel like paradoxically, in a way, without the protection or the shield or the Dutch courage of alcohol, being raw and emotional and real has actually helped me to realise and learn that I can totally trust myself to like deal with whatever situation is I'm in. I've always got all of my faculties about me. My memory has improved like so much. I just feel like I've always got the right answer, because I'm always fully connected to myself now in a way that I never was before. Not never was before, but when I was drinking regularly, there was, you know, if I wasn't drunk or hungover, there was always, you know, if you're always topping it up every 3 or 4 days or whatever it is, I think you're always kind of like 20% below par. And it takes, like I said again, for me, it's kind of this 2-3 week threshold to get to that point of total clarity of like, oh yeah, this is me. This is what I can do. Shit, I'm amazing. That bulletproof feeling of like, yeah, just bring it. I can deal with it. It's fine. I can deal with it. I've got this. So that is the best reward of not drinking for me, is that feeling of, and I think to get kind of more technical about it, I actually think that also comes from just the improvement in my sleep, which is something that everyone who gives up drinking talks about. Wow, suddenly you're getting proper sleep, which gives you you know, getting proper sleep, you're energized, you have the energy to deal with whatever life throws at you. You have the energy that the universe has blessed you with to be able to deal with whatever is coming up in your path. And so I think that increased energy leading to that feeling of that kind of like invincibleness is the best reward for not drinking for me. So the event on Wednesday is going to be very similar to the events I run in New York. It'll be a little bit of a talk from me really talking about how, you know, my goal and the aim of these events is not to help people get sober. It's not even really, as Laura and clubsoda.co.uk do so well, to give people tips about getting sober and advice and support. It's more about, I think the bigger mission for me is about really trying to reframe how we even think about alcohol, to get people to start asking the questions like, why as a society did we decide that we have to have alcohol to have a good time? And if we look at that and we can go, well, yeah, that seems a bit ridiculous actually, then how can we start to kind of like undo that social conditioning? So really kind of talking about the bigger picture, I suppose. And then I'm going to have another former journalist, former fashion editor called Chloe Kerman, who's now works as a kind of women's empowerment coach, is going to do a couple of guided meditations for everyone, because I'm going to talk as well about how meditation, and I'll say a bit more about this in a minute, how I think it's been really, really key for me in terms of unlearning the drinking patterns that I had picked up and that I had learned during my 20s and 30s. And then I'm going to have a panel discussion and just kind of open it up to the audience a bit like we're doing now, just really kind of like hear where people are at and respond to whatever questions people might have who've come along who are sober curious. The other woman on the panel is called Leah Garwood-Gowers. She runs this raw vegan cake company in London. Such great stuff. It's called the Hardyhood. They're going to be supplying cakes for us all on the night. And Leah I met when we were both working for a magazine in Ibiza in the summer of 2012. That was my last kind of like hard drinking summer, I suppose. She was interning with me on this magazine, and it was Ibiza. There was a lot of alcohol involved, and she actually ended the season dating this kind of extremely charismatic, award-winning barman called Charles. He's this French guy, and he runs like the hottest bar in Ibiza town and was specialised in absinthe cocktails. And she ended up staying at the end of the season to spend the winter with him. And then the next thing I hear, like fast forward 2-3 years, she's got this raw vegan cake company in London, and she's messaging me on Facebook going, I'm seeing you're doing the sober stuff. I don't drink anymore either. And I haven't actually heard her full story yet, but I'm really interested to hear what her sober curious journey has been, because she, I do know that she didn't go to AA. She doesn't identify as an alcoholic, that she's just chosen this for her life for whatever reason. So we'll have a panel discussion, and then I've got a bit of an intention setting ritual as well at the end. We're on the eve of the Cancer full moon. I like to get a bit mystical whenever I can. Cancer is the sign of self-care and self-nurturing, and I think that choosing not to drink is an incredible act of self-care. It really, really is about looking after yourself and giving yourself what you need. So we're going to do a bit of an intention setting ritual for people on their dry January and beyond. I'm really going to encourage people to go, why dry January? Why stop at January? Do February too. Have a fabulous February. Because I also think the idea of like a dry January, if you think about it, you start off January on this detox. A lot of people who are doing it, to anyone who's doing dry January here, just something to think about. If you're counting down the days till the relief of being able to drink again, that just speaks to the fact that we're, you know, our society, like I said at the beginning, is so addicted to alcohol. And I just think the more that we can actually question that and look at our behaviour and go, oh, and take some perspective, the better, which is where the meditation piece comes in, because it really is the tool that we have to be able to actually witness and watch our brain chemistry in action. When I say that, I mean to actually notice our reactions before acting on them, which is absolutely key, or has been absolutely key for me in terms of looking at the things that made me drink, looking at my drinking patterns and actually going, that's interesting. What's that all about? And I mean, that's again where that kind of bulletproof feeling comes in. I think is something incredibly empowering about being able to choose to override your brain chemistry, particularly when those neural pathways have been embedded over 20 years or more, in my case, of drinking mindlessly without awareness. So yeah, there's another great book that I would highly recommend to anyone called The Biology of Desire, Why Addiction is Not a Disease, and it's by a guy called Mark something, can't remember, I think it's maybe Mark Lewis. He's a former heroin addict turned brain scientist, and he really goes into the whole brain science of addiction and gives incredible case studies of an alcoholic, a crystal meth addict, a heroin addict, an anorexic, and a prescription painkiller addict, all of whom through this practice, through various different methods, but all of whom kind of like got sober, got clean on their own, and through choice, if that makes sense, through choosing this as the path that was right for them. People who were, severely addicted. Again, it's a controversial subject, but definitely worth reading about. Yes, great. You've got the book on the shop. Get the Biology of Desire book. Yeah, it's a really, really, really good one. It was the first book I really read on my path that helped to put a few things into place for me. I was like, interesting. This was the most interesting thing I got out of reading that book. As human beings, we are hardwired to become addicted to alcohol. Our brain is hardwired to seek out and repeat experiences that A, give us pleasure, or B, numb pain. Alcohol does both those things. Alcohol in itself is a highly addictive substance, and one which is heavily marketed to us from the age that we're old enough to know what's going on. And so put those three things together, I believe that everyone who drinks alcohol is addicted to alcohol to some degree, which for me immediately began to remove some of the stigma. Like I said, well, this actually just makes me human. Of course this has happened. My brain is hardwired to become addicted to this thing which is being sold to me every step of my life. So yeah. Reference document for the books. I can't see. Oh, here we go. There are a few questions here. Labels. So last century. Seriously. We're just humans doing the best that we can with the information that we've got. It's just that we've been misinformed when it comes to alcohol. And it's in our power to inform ourselves so that we can make the right choices going forward.